Okay, welcome back to another episode of M&A Uncovered. My name's Andy. I'm from the Exit Advisor. We help business owners either exit their business successfully or grow through acquisition. This week, we've been speaking to Steve Lawrence, the founder of the Uncomplicated group. He used to have a corporate job, and then he left to buy a business, which is called Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, ETA. You'll hear us talk about that a lot in the episode, in injection molding. Now, that is his background, so he understands the business very well, but he's obviously never owned a business in that sector. So it's a really good interview. We get into the weeds of culture, integration, mistakes made, how he's funded it, how he's found the staff to run it, and how he spends his time. So sit back, grab a coffee and enjoy it. And thanks for following along. Okay, so Steve, well, firstly, thanks for coming on. If you can start by kind of giving us a bit of a background to you. Obviously, you're from a corporate environment. You're not from an entrepreneurial environment. So can you explain a little bit about where you came from and how you've arrived at where you are now?
Yeah, I worked for a big American corporate for about 12 years. And the whole thing for the business was working out the 20% of customers and products where you get 80% of your outcomes. That was really deeply embedded in the kind of culture of that company. So I started off in the order processing team. And over like 12, 13 years, I worked my way through the business. I was really fortunate that I was involved in a lot of really good projects around simplifying companies, working out where you make your money, insourcing work and having production in various locations. But then after quite a few years, I'd always had this kind of like itch that I wanted to do something for myself and I wanted to be a bit more in control of my destiny. And I got really bored of filling out spreadsheets and stuff that I knew no one was actually going to read. And I was kind of filling it out just, I don't know, because I was told to rather than knowing there was going to be any downstream impact of what I was actually doing. So, yeah, I was getting itchy feet a bit after a couple of years, needing to do my own thing. And I was thinking, well, I've learned all this really great stuff and I've been very fortunate in my job to have been trained and seen all these things. And I wondered, is it possible to apply some of the things I've learned onto smaller businesses, but with me as the owner rather than as an employee? So I was researching around and then heard about this trend of a large number of people potentially looking to retire, and then there not being enough people to be the next custodian of that business, the next owner. And that rings especially true in manufacturing, where there's not a massive throughput or funnel of younger folks who are trained up coming through who potentially could take over these businesses. And a lot of the owners, specifically the ones I've dealt with, they don't really have a succession plan. That's partly because it's a small business and you don't have necessarily talent funnels and all the stuff I was used to in corporate, but also their kids want to dance on TikTok, or they want to sell insurance, or they want to be famous on the internet for some reason. So they don't necessarily want to work in a plastic injection molding factory. So then it creates an opening. These folks want to retire and the business has given them a good life, but it's time for them to wind down. So that company needs another custodian. And that was what the gap I'm trying to plug of like, okay, I have got 15 years experience in the sector. Mostly know what I'm talking about. At least I like to think I do. And then, yeah, like I say, plugging that gap of, okay, maybe I could be that guy who could take over the company, and then apply some of this stuff that I've learned from my corporate role into an SME.
That's quite a big jump, especially, I assume at that time you've got sort of family and mortgages and overheads and that kind of stuff. So a two-part question, really. Firstly, how did you find a target company? What did that process look like? And secondly, how did you go about getting funding for it, given that you have no kind of deliverability proof at this stage of doing this by yourself as a business owner?
The quick answer is I learned it by getting it wrong twice. So I learned it the slow, expensive way. Obviously, I'd researched and read up on how the process works roughly and tried to make friends with a few brokers just to get an idea of how to structure deals. But at the very beginning, I wasn't particularly specific about what I was looking for. I just knew I wanted to get out of my job and find something that I could own and that, of course, could pay the bills and support my life and things.
Yeah.
So I did that a couple of times on companies that were way too small and weren't really fundable.
So these are the ones that you didn't buy them. You just sort of went through the process and they weren't.
Yeah, like pretty much to the end when I've spent all the money on legals and arrangement fees and things like that, only to find out that this wasn't the right type of deal that I should be doing. So
well, that's interesting because I think that there's a sunk cost fallacy, and a lot of people would probably have thought, well, I've spent all this money on legals and due diligence and all this time, and maybe particularly if you've done it a couple of times, maybe I'm in the wrong. Maybe I should force myself to get into this deal. So how did you stop yourself? Because I always say one of my things is no deal is always better than a bad deal. And so how did you sort of limit yourself and sort of protect yourself against making the wrong decision there?
I wouldn't say I did a particularly good job at the beginning. As I look back on it now, kind of 2 or 3 years later, I was naively pursuing stuff that I was opening myself up to cost and risks that I probably shouldn't, looking at deals and not building a relationship with sellers that where we both know what done looks like and what good looks like, and we're working our way through. I was probably loading myself up with legal costs and trusting a few things that I was told more than I should. So I wouldn't like to say I'm in a great position to give advice, or certainly back then. Now I've learned that it's very much about that relationship with the seller and both wanting a mutual outcome for something and understanding what a fundable deal looks like and what their good looks like for them as well, rather than just, send an offer. Oh, I'm really pleased I've accepted it. Let's jump to legals and let's get really deep into a process, which is what I did the first time around. I think I was just so excited that someone accepted an offer that I dived into due diligence and maybe overwhelmed with a long list of checklists of things process. But yeah, that's all calmed down and kind of learned out the hard way, I guess.
Okay, and how did you sort of find these deals? Where's the deal origination coming from? Is it brokers? Is it a lot of donkey work yourself? Is it leads, referrals? Kind of talk to us about that.
At the beginning, when I had a really wide criteria, I was just wanted something in the manufacturing sector. So at the beginning, I was using the broker website. So I was speaking to a few brokers and kind of letting it come to me, really. But I realized after a couple of deals that I probably was doing myself a bit of a disservice, because I've got expertise in injection molding. That's been my background. So rather than kind of sitting around and just hitting refresh on the broker websites, waiting for this unicorn perfect deal to come to me, I thought, no, I need to go and find it. So after wasting a lot of time on the websites, hoping unicorns were going to come to me, by the time I ditched that, I decided to buy some data in my sector of all of the companies in the market, the age profile and size profile of a deal that I might be able to actually do. So now I've kind of built my own, I guess you could say, like CRM funnel of a picture of all of the companies. And then I get in touch with them myself. I send letters to people. I connect with people on LinkedIn. I sometimes call people up as well. So at the beginning, very reactive and waiting for it to come to me, hoping websites were going to solve my problem. But now I'm way more proactive. And like I say, I've built a decent-ish picture of the ones I can do, the ones that I could potentially be of interest to, and I prospect myself to them.
Nice. Okay, sort of that hunting versus farming thing in terms of lead gen then. Okay, so you've identified your first decent business that you're ready to proceed on. You've got all the way to the end. What kind of lessons have you learned from the one that went successfully versus the ones before that? What was the reason that you took the plunge on that one rather than the two or whatever before?
I think it's kind of what I mentioned earlier about having a much deeper understanding of what the seller actually is looking for and really, really going deep on that, instead of just, I was probably at the beginning letting the spreadsheets make the decisions for me. And then someone said to me, no one ever lost money in Excel. And I was like, oh yeah, actually, that's really true. Why are you putting together all these models? Things don't go wrong in the model. Things go wrong in the real world. Yeah. So I think the main thing is to really understand the motivation behind what the sale would be and what good would look like for the seller, and also you get clues as to the type of business that you might be acquiring when you're visiting the factories, when you're speaking with the owners, because these guys have often owned these places for 20 to 30 years. So there's a real deep embedded series of habits and beliefs and culture that they've created. So if you see some red flags, or if you spot something that you're not quite sure about, you should jump on that really quickly, instead of going into it with rose tinted glasses and expecting your spreadsheet's going to say it's all going to be easy and you can move on to the next one within 6 months. That just is not realistic.
Okay, so there's a couple of things there. Firstly, like the mindset shift that you go through from being an employee to a business owner. How did you adapt to that? What was kind of going through your head as your, the first day post acquisition? Like what was your plan and your structure to kind of move forward and make it a success?
I didn't want to do too much at the very, very beginning, but I did, I guess you could say, swallow humble pie after 2 or 3 months, where I'd had all of this corporate stuff that I mentioned, and strategies and ways of working and models and things that I'd learned over my long corporate career. And I thought I could just come in and impose those on the business really quickly. But it became quite clear that this is no place for your corporate fancy spreadsheets and your corporate presentations. PowerPoint is useless here. So I had to kind of realize that originally I wanted to be the guy to come in and put the systems into these businesses, because, hey, that's me. I'm the corporate systems guy. But it became clear that this is way more of a people based approach was needed. And I shouldn't be doing the systems and processes to the business. I need to do them with the business. So I was really lucky after a few months of kind of deliberately not doing loads and just feeling out what I thought this might look like. I had a chance meeting with an EOS implementer. EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. It's a business operating system of how you run the place, how we set a vision for the company, how we look at how the right people are in the business, the types of meetings, the types of data we look at, etc. So it's a series of tools and structures. And at the beginning, I resisted it because I'm like, no, I know best. I'm the corporate guy. But thankfully, after that meeting, I realized that it would be better to do it with the team using EOS as our primary business structure. So I guess to answer your question, how did I make the leap from corporate to where I am now? Probably resistant at the beginning. And then now I've got into EOS and we're 2 years into the journey. It's probably the best thing I've done since. And it's really helped to get these companies running the way that we want to and get the best from them.
Nice. I know that you're big on culture, and maybe that's the answer is the EOS thing. And it seems like, to be fair, that you've taken your time and you've kind of waited, because I think a lot of acquisitions, the people coming in want to kind of make changes straight away and get the business into the way that they think, and sort of turn the ship around, so to speak. I think you showed sort of really good patience there. Is there any kind of lessons that you learned? Well, I suppose there will be lessons that you learned the hard way. So can you tell me about the lessons that you learned the hard way in terms of culture and trying to get a larger team on board? Because I think a lot of buyers, a lot of employees in target companies, their first thought is there's going to be huge change, jobs could be at risk, everything's going to change for us. We could be potentially really resistant to this. How did you deal with that, and what steps did you take to kind of make that part of it work?
I think it's a process I'm still dealing with, to be honest. So you're right. When people hear about change, unfortunately, it's happening a lot in the manufacturing sector, where an acquisition often means that the place is going to get merged with something else, or it's going to be closed down, or there's a big concern about asset strippers who come in and just take all of the assets and sell them off and then shut the location down. So that period of building trust with the team and showing them that you're the real deal and that you want the best for the company, and that all the things you said to the seller when you buy it, you said them for the right reasons and them to be true. That takes a really long time for people to believe that. And I'm probably still going through it. So we update our people every quarter as part of our EOS process on what were the objectives we set last quarter, what are we doing next quarter, what's our annual plan, and we have a recap on the culture and the values and what it is that we're trying to achieve as a group. And that's been really helpful in just keep showing up, repeat yourself and say the same messages often, and people can start to see around the facilities that you're investing in some new equipment, that we are maybe doing some training, that you're laying out the factory differently. So these are all signals that you're here for the long term. Mm-hmm. If you came in, spent no money and no one's allowed to do anything, then maybe that's a signal that perhaps you're not who you like doing what you say you're going to do. So I think that's been a key part of it. In terms of learnings and lessons from that, I probably didn't do it quick enough, and I still maybe don't give it the level of priority that it deserves. So I've got a factory based in Leicester and one based in Manchester, and I live in Kent. So I'm not on site every day. So I'm there a couple of times a month for a few days here and there. So you don't get much of like FaceTime. We've got 25 people in one factory and 15 in another. So I don't get loads of FaceTime with the teams. So there's still probably a little bit of like, okay, what are we doing next? What's going to happen and stuff. So I wish at that beginning, I did spend more time at the start on site. For the first few months, I was there a lot. But perhaps I could have done even more to really try and show the team. Mm-hmm. We also spent a lot of time on what we're calling invisible work. So you're right when you said earlier that we didn't change loads of stuff really quickly, but we did change some back office things like going cloud-based with our finance system, putting in a new P&L structure. But the team can't see any of that. And it takes ages to get it the way you want it and get reporting and KPIs. So we were making changes, but they were invisible. So maybe I should have done some visible changes more quickly so that people can see that you genuinely are invested.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you've got two factories. Are you operating those kind of as two independent businesses, or are you moving to more of like a holdco model where you'll eventually have more acquisitions bolted into there and there'll be like shared systems and ways of work? Or are these two sort of very much separate companies at the moment?
Very timely question, because this was my realization over Christmas.
Right, okay.
I took some time away because I was working very, very hard and sitting in about 5 seats in the business, which meant I wasn't doing a particularly good job in any of the seats. Mm-hmm. So this whole thing started with, I wonder if I can buy a company and get out of my job. And then another one came along. And then we've done a couple of asset acquisitions that we've bolted into the group as well. And the plan was always for the companies to run independently of each other. So it's decentralized. It's the same manufacturing technology, it's injection molding, but they're very different markets, very different customers, very different things that they make, the types of products that we make. So there's no intention of blending it all into one huge company. It's more of I think they say house of brands rather than branded house. So they're all independent. But what that means is if you keep doing that and adding more on, it's just more meetings and visits and stuff for me. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have a light touch holdco. I've only just started to implement that this year. So in the last 4 weeks, I've been busily putting in a centralized HR function. We've centralized and standardized our KPIs and finance reporting at group level. We've been doing the same on sales and our CRM and how we think about our customers. So it might be better to check in the future and see how we've done, because I'm literally just starting and having the realization that if we want to do factory number 3, 4, and 5, then it's just not going to work the way we've been doing it at the moment.
Yeah, understood. On that, you're obviously in Kent and you've got two factories that are geographically a distance away. How important are the people that are kind of running the operations on a day-to-day, and have you brought those in, or were they with the existing business? And then the second part of the question is as your group grows, what kind of roles are you looking for in terms of senior leadership team to free up your, I think you said a minute ago, you were doing 4 or 5, wearing 4 or 5 different hats or sitting in 4 or 5 different chairs. Yeah. So how do you give yourself space to grow there and kind of build that team out?
I'm lucky that I've got a combo of fresh faces and people that have worked for the business for many years pre-acquisition, pre me getting involved. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a nice balance of fresh ideas and fresh perspectives, along with kind of maintaining the existing culture and way of working and relationships with the people. On both locations, it wouldn't be fair to say there really was a management structure in place. There were managers who owned certain functions, but they weren't really operating as a management team. So that was one of the first things I wanted to do. We needed to have someone on site who is the number one on ops, on finance, on sales. Or if that seat's vacant, then we need to fill it. So we've currently got local management teams in each location, and day to day they absolutely run the show. I've been acting kind of as like an MD in each location, like the troubleshooter, and bring it to me and make a final call and those types of things. But they very much run the day to day. But as we grow, I think we need localized MDs in the sites. So whether that's a local managing director, or we call it a COO, or a business unit manager, general manager, that type of thing, someone who's overall responsible for the site. So I think the plan will be for me to step out of those seats as we get bigger, and then we will put some people into those, whether that's internal promotions or external. I guess I need to figure that out over time. But the only way to grow will be to create some kind of central person who ultimately owns the site.
Okay, so in terms of growth then, when you were looking at these businesses, what did you look at in terms of like operational risks and opportunities and threats? And then, is there anything you kind of looked at that made you think about the synergies that could exist between the two existing businesses?
It was kind of obvious on both occasions that there was more capacity there. So I like to think about the companies and look at how would we grow and what we're going to grow into. And generally it's underdeployed machines. So there might be some machines that are sat there, someone else has bought them, they're sitting there, and we could grow by using the existing capacity rather than needing a new factory or 10 new machines. It's a very expensive upfront way to grow. So that's one of the things I look for, is undeployed capacity, which we had in both locations.
Just to stop you there, did both of those sellers see that? Have they been in the woods of it and they couldn't see the sort of forest for the trees, or had they recognized that and just maybe haven't got enough energy or resource to increase capacity?
Yeah, I think the businesses had given them nice lives and they were at a revenue level that they were happy with.
Yeah.
And kudos to them. It gave them the lives that they wanted. They built the company they wanted. It's just not what I set out to do. I don't set out to buy it and then keep it flat. So, on both conversations, they both said that we could be doing more. There are other things out there. Of course, it's risk appetite. So you might want to do a bolt-on acquisition or an adjacent market or whatever. But by that point, that just wasn't something that interested those guys. So to answer your question about inefficiencies and things around the factory, it was quite clear that there were just some things that I'd seen and learned in corporate that just weren't being applied. So there were certain product lines that were driving a huge cost that were low margin. So if you strip that out of the factory, it's going to remove a load of noise. It's going to reduce a load of labor cost. It's going to reduce a load of energy cost. I noticed, again, because I'm in the sector, I could see that some of the material prices we were paying, they looked a bit too high versus what I'd expected for us to be paying. So we did some tenders and stuff, put some of the material costs out, managed to save on materials. We hadn't done price increases for quite a long time. So again, we looked at our customers, looked at ones that hadn't been looked at for a while. We'd absorbed all this inflation. So a lot of this was post-COVID. The materials markets went crazy and hadn't done a great job of passing that on to our customers. So we'd been sitting for 2 years just absorbing all these extra costs. So I'm looking going, well, A, the price needs to go up, and B, that material cost needs to come down. But these are just things that you know from being in the sector and having an idea of what you should be paying for things. And you can spot inefficient product lines and families that have got no business being on that shop floor because they're just not driving any of the type of work you should be doing.
This comes back to your point at the start about spending a lot of your time working on the Pareto's optimality and the 80%, 20%.
Yep.
And I guess, owners who have been in it for so long maybe aren't approaching it as kind of a fresh angle and scrutinizing everything. It's really interesting. Did you find that you could put like a numerical value on these things, or what I'm trying to work out is kind of when you negotiated the prices and how you kind of structured the deals. Did you think, well, if we do this thing that I found when we walked around during DD, I know that we could save or bring in X, or were you able to put kind of rough costs on those? And if you were, how realistic were they sort of post acquisition?
Put them in the model, and like I said, no one loses money in Excel, so they went in the model. Um, Most of them have delivered what we hoped they would. Obviously, there's a couple of misses because you can't win them all. But in that early conversations with the seller, you don't want to be saying, "Hey, mate, guess what? I've just spotted this thing that you haven't seen for 20 years, and it's you need to stop doing it on day one." That's not a great way to build relationships with the
Yeah.
seller. And of course, at that point, it's naive to do that because you don't know best. So you can spot a few things and make some assumptions on run rates and ways that things have worked before. I always go on the conservative side of what the saving or the efficiency gain might be, so that there's still some upside. I don't really include those in valuation or structure or anything like that, because up to now they're just a theory in my head. It's more, if the theory's strong enough, I'll go and do the deal and then see if we can do it. I don't think it would be right to value it based upon, if all of these projects go perfectly, there's this multiple and then there's this much of additional cash generation. So I do it just on a 3-year EBITDA run rate, and then apply a multiple to it. And then anything on top of that is it's my upside, really.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most common questions that I get asked is what's my business worth? And there are several approved methods that you can use to value a business: discounted cash flow, net asset value, multiples of EBITDA, all that kind of stuff. But there is also that kind of secret sauce that each buyer will have, and they'll know where the kind of strengths are and where they need to maybe apply a discount to the price because of something they've seen that they don't necessarily like. And so deal structure then, you talked a lot at the start about finding out what's important to the seller. How did you kind of take that into account with an offer? How did you find out what's important to them, and kind of what did it look like in terms of them staying on post acquisition? To tell us about that kind of process.
Sure. The easy one is the post acquisition consultancy from the sellers. So it was actually quite a short period in both of my, well, I've done 5 deals, but 3 were asset deals, so they're slightly different. We're just obviously buying customers or machinery and things. But in the 2 factories that we've bought, both of the sellers were out quite quickly because that's what they wanted. So we had agreements in the contracts that they would be called upon for very important things if we needed to. But it was quite clear in both of those cases that they obviously don't want to jeopardize the business longer term by just disappearing, but it was never going to be a long period of staying in the business. So that was fine by me, but needed to be agreed up front because obviously you don't want to have a surprise later on down the line. I'm open to longer agreements as well. It's obviously, like I say, it's case by case. So that's that bit. In terms of structure, tends to be percentage down on day one and then a deferred consideration element of that. So reason for it is kind of keeps the sellers interested. I guess that's not really the right word, but if there's some deferred payments into the future,
skin in the game.
If a seller, if they absolutely refuse any of that, it makes you question. They want all their money on day one. Does that mean that they know there's some kind of inherent risk in this business that they know about because they've been in here for 30 years that my legal process isn't going to find? So if someone's really anti that, that's just something to be quite wary of. So by them agreeing to a deferred element, it states that they believe the business can continue, and they believe as well, I think they're taking a bit of a vote on me, that they believe I'm the right next custodian because they think I can take it on and look after the customers, look after the staff, and keep making those payments. So I like to do that, and I'm kind of a bit cautious if someone won't do it. And that's kind of it. I'm not massively scientific. Valuation wise, it's like I say, a multiple of EBITDA. I've started to deduct capex, so it's not really EBITDA. It's kind of the cash that the business has generated, and then I'll deduct any known capex issues. I've found on both occasions that people who are heading towards the end of their time or considering selling up, they're not doing hardcore replacement capex because obviously they want to keep the money for themselves, which makes absolute sense. So you kind of come in and there's expenses that have not been looked at for a few years and capex that is probably overdue. So it makes sense to include that in the valuation, because otherwise, if you're raising debt and you've got debt payments that is too close to the EBITDA, you've got no kind of budget for capex. So that's another thing. So yeah, I wouldn't like to say it's overly structured and too unrealistically attainable numbers and things. I don't really go for that. I like to keep it quite simple and clear.
Okay, so you're looking at more of a free cash flow model rather than an EBITDA. That's interesting. Yeah. And then in terms of finance, I suppose there's lots of kind of chunky assets here on the balance sheet that you could maybe leverage to raise finance, probably a little bit of accounts receivable stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
The first time around, I'd never done it. So I was quite nervous. And I was told consistently by my broker, who was great, that this is going to happen. It's no problem. This is just part of the process. But I, having come off the back of two that hadn't worked as well, I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, until I can see the cash, I'm just going to have to kind of go with it and be a bit skeptical. But we've got we've got an invoice finance facility. There's a small cash flow loan, obviously some equity from me as well, and then that deferred element. So there's kind of like a combo of debt, I guess, and then there's obviously some equity from me that I mentioned. So very typical model of how to raise in these types of businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. It's interesting to know from you if there are any kind of major gaps in the due diligence that you went through, and any kind of discoveries you made on, post acquisition for things that you'd missed in the DD. Any horror stories you can share, or successes in it?
I think DD starts with you and the seller, not in the legal checklist process that you go through. So, I wouldn't like to say there's been any horror stories of things that we wish we'd found because our process wasn't very good or our legal process didn't work. I think it's more culturally. I think it's back to what I said earlier of if the seller's a certain way, the business is going to be that way as well, because they are the controlling mind of the business for 30 years. So if someone's very open and transparent, it probably means the team and the culture is open and transparent. If that's not the case, then that's probably what you're going to find later. So there's times where I've wished that I had delved deeper to just understand a bit more of how the team runs, how the team was built, how we're likely to be received coming in as the new acquirer. But I don't think it's the sort of stuff you can put in a legal checklist. It'd make my life easier if we could. So if someone's got one, please reach out on LinkedIn. But it's that stuff, the kind of more soft things that really define how quickly are you going to be able to build a team? How quickly are you going to get your culture in or make some tweaks to the existing? Are you going to be able to build a management team? Are there people even in there that you think are in there that can do these functions? So that doesn't show up on the legal side, but I'd say that's the main bit. That's your job as the searcher or the acquirer. You need to get that bit right, but it's the hardest bit.
You mentioned your broker there. Any other team members sort of externally that you've brought in that have really helped? I guess solicitors for you would have been a good one at the start in that first transaction. Any other kind of third party professional services that people need to think about when they do this kind of thing?
Nothing beyond the usual. So I had a good lawyer. I deliberately went for a local guy so that I could always literally see him around town if I needed to. Obviously,
local in Kent or local to
to me in Kent. Yeah, so he's close by. Obviously, he's an M&A lawyer. He's not just a random chap that I found in town. Mm-hmm. But that was important to me to have someone so we could, if it was going wrong, we can meet up and go okay, well, how are we going to work our way out of this? So I've got a lawyer. A broker to help us with the funding side, and then an accountant to build the finance covenants into the contract, and also just modeling and helping you to not get too excited about numbers that you've put in your own Excel spreadsheet. It always looks different from a third party when they see it. So that's really helpful. But nothing beyond that. I think in the future, I would probably bring in more DD around the state and the run times of the equipment that's on site to mitigate that capex risk that I mentioned.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of times where I've spent money that I wasn't expecting to need to, and then in hindsight, you're like, that's totally obvious. We should have spotted that. Yeah. So I might do that as part of it. It really depends on the types of deals that come along.
Okay, we're kind of coming up towards the end now, but I want to ask, knowing what you know now, if you had a kind of crystal ball when you started, what would you do differently, if anything, and what would you do the same, if anything?
I would keep EOS. That's been the number one win for me, of having an operating system that we can all get behind and everyone knows their roles and what we're shooting for. So I definitely think that's been the most impactful thing that I'm pleased we did. What would I not do? I don't really know. I can't really answer that, apart from obvious little tactical mistakes that we may have made. Because I like the idea that I'm getting my hands dirty now and making mistakes now, so that when a bigger deal or in the future, I think you need to learn these lessons. If you get it right every time, you don't learn so much from success. I learn more from when it goes wrong. So that's not to say, I haven't made mistakes and nothing's been bad enough to warrant it. There's things that have gone wrong, but I quite like that because it's all part of the transition from being a corporate. Yeah, exactly. You kind of need to get your hands dirty. It's why I've gone in and been the MD on the site, even though I'm not local to it, because I wanted to know what it's like to run the location. So when I'm recruiting in the future, I know their daily pressures, I know the daily motivations, the types of things. It puts you in a better spot to hire those folks in the future.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, last question then, for people who are considering, like you, kind of, in a job at the moment, in a career, maybe they're kind of experts like you in their field. What kind of tips have you got for people to stop sort of daydreaming about ETA and start getting more serious about it? What would you say to them?
I'd probably join a group of some description to take some of the fear out. There are some amateur mistakes that you can make, but there are plenty of groups. There seems to be a pretty strong, they call it ETA, don't they? Entrepreneurship through acquisition. There's a pretty strong ETA movement in the UK. I see a new conference or a new meetup or a new group springing up, and WhatsApp groups and stuff all the time. So it'd be worth joining those and meeting with people who are trying to do the same as you. That'll take a lot of the fear out. And especially at the beginning, there's a lot of things that I was thinking, I have no clue how to do that, but someone just knows a guy or they know what to do. It's way more approachable than you think. So I would definitely say join a group of people who are trying to do the same. But I would also issue a note of caution, which is make sure it's what you really want, because it has been a lot harder than I anticipated. So that's not to say bad, but definitely harder. So it's a whole different ball game when you've taken out a loan and you've got a brand new team that don't know anything about you, and your business is 200 miles away, and that debt payment's due at the end of the month, and you've inherited a finance system that isn't laid out the way you want, and suddenly you're thinking, okay, what have I done? So just make sure you're ready for all of that. Like I say, it doesn't mean it's bad, but you do need to. I had a bit of a culture shock at that very beginning bit. Very pleased I did it. This is a necessary part of the journey. But be ready. You're not going to come in and it's not going to be, rainbows and puppies on day one.
Brilliant. Okay, so we kind of got like a minute or so left now. So in terms of the future for you, you've got 5 deals under your belt that you mentioned. What does the kind of next 5 years look like for you?
I want to get to 5 locations. So we're at 2. But before I do that, I need to work my way out of the current seats and responsibilities that I'm in, so that the sites I've got can run independently. I don't want to go off chasing shiny new things and then ruin the stuff we've built so far. So I'd love to get to 5 within 5 years, and keep applying our business model that we're doing and get these businesses to be. We say we're making businesses the best version of themselves, and I want to stay true to that. But the goal is 5 locations without jeopardizing all the work we've done so far.